Is it okay for Christians to read other religious holy books?
Where America is in Bible prophecy.
Women becoming pastors and
Anointing homes and praying over homes.
Why would God have people tormented and burned for eternity?
What happened or where Jesus went after he died?
What is your opinion and what does the Bible say?
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. And now here's today's host, Brian Perez.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the Pastor's Perspective program and watching us online as well. We're here to answer Bible questions like we do every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. That's when we are on live. However, the program you're listening to right now is not live on the radio, so don't call in with your questions today, but save them for tomorrow. That being said, we've got plenty of calls that are on the board because you guys know the phone number to call on Thursdays between 4 and 5 when we record this episode, so we will be with you guys in just a little bit. In the studio today is Pastor Brian Brodersen from Calvary Chapel, Costa, Mesa in Southern California, and on the Bobby Cam, we've got author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube, also 1minuteapologist.com with like 1,200 videos that you can watch. So start watching those if you haven't watched them yet. All right, guys, how you doing? Ready to answer some questions?
Good.
We're ready. All right, then. Let's do this. And we'll begin with Tammy calling from Florida. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Tammy.
Hi, good evening, pastors. My question tonight is along the same lines of addiction, but of a different sort.
Mm-hmm.
It's not marijuana or things like that, but it's the casino. I am a born-again Christian, but I will confess that I do enjoy going to the casino. Sometimes when I have just a little extra money, I do enjoy, just going and seeing if I could win a few extra bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to get like a biblical perspective from that. I've asked this question to many different leaders, and some agree, but I've never really had like a scholarly answer to it. More or less, it's like just other Christians like myself who are just, believers, don't know much about the word in terms of digging into the answers for stuff like this. So
right now, on Thursday's program, we did talk a lot about addiction, marijuana addiction, things like that. So that's what Tammy was talking about when she started her question. So Tammy, you're talking about something beyond just buying the occasional lottery ticket at the 7-Eleven. I mean, you're talking where you're walking in and spending maybe how much are you spending at a time, would you say?
Not a lot because I don't make a lot of money, but sometimes if I have an extra $50 or $100, I personally don't feel any conviction about, going and doing that. I feel like it's a legal thing. It's not like I'm sneaking and doing something that's illegal. It's sanctioned by the state. Same thing with the lottery. I don't spend a lot of money on it, but it is sanctioned by the state. It's legal, so I don't have any problem with taking $20 and buying a scratch off or a lottery ticket. So I just want to know, though, from a biblical perspective, because I really do want to do what's right. And if there's something wrong with doing that, I really want to just try to, clean up my life and maybe curb that and eliminate it.
Tammy, let me ask, so how long have you been doing this?
Actually, I would say it's been a little over 10 years now.
Okay.
My ex-husband kind of introduced me to the casino,
Okay.
and so going about 10 years back.
Okay, and you go with what's the frequency that you go? Maybe every few months, or
I used to go a lot, like let's say once a week, like on a Friday or a Saturday night. Lately, because of the pandemic, I haven't, been going as much. But I do go, I would say it's down to maybe once a month now, twice a month.
And do you go alone or do you go with friends or?
I do go alone a lot because I am single. And then sometimes I do meet up with a friend of mine there. She travels from another part of the county, and we do meet and just hang out. It's a chance for us to mingle and hang out.
Yeah.
And catch up. And, like I said, I don't really feel like I'm addicted because, again, I could go every day if I really wanted to. But, but it's an outlet for me. I get a chance to dress up and, and look nice and just go hang out and have a little fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, it sounds to me, fairly innocent, like, some guys getting together on a Friday night and having a poker game and, throwing in some money and I don't think there's necessarily anything the matter with that. I think it's significant that you've been doing this for 10 years or so, that you haven't developed, some addictive sort of a thing where you're hawking things to get more money because you're trying to do this, and then you're getting in debt because, like we were earlier talking about addiction to narcotics and so forth, and everybody knows that there's such thing as Gamblers Anonymous as well, because some people can get so addicted they destroy their lives. I've known people who have gambled away their house, gambled away their car, wrecked their marriage. I mean, that's a reality that can happen. It doesn't sound like you're even, moving in that direction at all.
No, sir, I'm not.
Yeah. I guess I guess the other thing I would just ask, the environment. I mean, I'm not a casino guy, so I don't really hang out in casinos, but I have friends that live in Las Vegas, and I've gone to casinos to eat. They always have good restaurants and things like that. But I know there can be a dodgy side of it as well, kind of a pickup thing for people and stuff like that. So I would just say I would want to be careful that you weren't, putting yourself in an environment where you were maybe vulnerable to other things. Getting picked up on, that sort of thing that is clearly, scripturally not the thing that God wants you to be involved in.
Yes. And thank God I'm not in the market for that at this time. I'm happily single and just happily I've been married. So,
Now, do you have
I'm enjoying my single life.
Do you have a good church, Tammy, that you're plugged into?
Yes, I do. I have a wonderful church. I actually attend Community Christian Church out in Tamarack, Florida, Pastor Scott Anon. And he's really great. And so I'm very happy there.
Yeah. Bobby, did you want to add anything?
I think that your appraisal of the situation and discussion is great. I would say for the broader audience listening, some of the things to be aware of is we have to make sure that our motivation in gambling is not so that we can get rich quick and not have to work. Work is a good thing, and God wants us to work, and God wants us to have labor because he wants us to make a difference in this world. And I think a lot of times people's perspective is, how can I win the lottery? How can I, go and gamble so that I don't have to work? And therefore, gambling could foster laziness. It could cause greed in one's life. And the Bible's clear, even in Proverbs 13:11, it says that wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. And I love that verse right there, because how many people have won the lottery and they're instantly rich and then they lose it all? It's as if there was no wisdom to get financial advice to know how to kind of reserve some of this and put it away in a Roth 401k. So I think that if people are doing it and they're just lighthearted about it, I would say if we become rich off of a lottery ticket, let's say, are we still going to serve the Lord? Are we still going to work? Are we still going to be generous? Or is it going to foster greed, laziness? I think that would be dangerous.
Tammy, does that help you?
Yes, it does. It helps me a lot. I really enjoy you men of God, and thank you so much for taking my call and answering my question.
You're welcome, Tammy.
You
So
bet.
good to talk to you. Glad you're listening.
Thanks for calling us from Florida. And something she said at the beginning of the conversation, it's legal in Florida to gamble. So think of all these other things that are legal to do in certain states.
And, I'm glad you brought that up because, that's a thing that nowadays we really do have to be careful about. And, I mean, it's not just now, but it has been the case for a long time. Some people would justify abortion by saying, well, it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court says it's okay. So what's the problem? Well, remember, we've got a law that supersedes all human law, and that's God's law. So, they're legalizing everything now. Everything that was at one time, drugs. Hard drugs. Now we're going to, we've legalized pot. Now, hey, what the heck? Let's just go all the way and let's just get, the heroin and let's get the meth and let's get the cocaine and let's just get it all in there. And it'll all be legal and it'll all be good. Mm-hmm. Well, it'll all still be sin. Yeah. And it'll all still be a violation of God's law. So the state and the federal government might say you could do anything and everything, but God's law doesn't change. So that's where we have to remember. We just have to keep that in mind. Just because the state says you can do it doesn't mean you can do it from God's perspective.
Yeah. Bobby, anything to add to that?
Yeah. Right on, Brian. I'm glad you ended on that note. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's moral.
All right. This is Pastor's Perspective. Brian Perez here with Pastor Brian Brodersen and Dr. Bobby Conway. Let's go to California. Here is Emina. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for taking my question and my call. My question basically, and I understand exactly what you mean, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's proper to take it or good or even biblical to take it. I'm Native American and I've been a devout Christian for over 45 years. I'm 52 and I was in an abusive marriage and got brain damage because of it. From 1992, I was going into the hospital twice a week just to get what they call their cocktail shots because my migraines were so severe. And it stopped me from working, it stopped me from sleeping, stopped me from just being human.
Yeah.
And back in 2014, I got a job with a doctor who was a cannabis doctor. And he's seen my problems and what I was going through. And he says, why don't you take sativa? In the cannabis department, there's different strains. There's sativa, there's indica, there's CBD, hybrid. And the sativa actually helps for anything going on in your brain, helps your brain to function correctly. And I started taking sativa. From 2015 until actually today, I have not gone back into the hospital to get a shot anymore. And my migraines have actually stopped. I only take it at night, and normally it's only one joint at night, so that way I don't get these migraines. I don't take it during work. I don't do it during the day, only at night, so that way I can sleep and not have migraines. I see it as something that's helped me because the other medications I was getting, these cocktail shots, they just mask the injuries. That's all they did. They didn't repair them. They didn't fix them. They didn't stop them. But the sativa stops them. Mm-hmm. I read the Bible a lot, and it does bother me that I have to take sativa cannabis in order to stop the migraines. Mm-hmm. So that bothers me.
Well, this is kind of where our conversation on this a few days back, this is where it all sort of began because Bobby was talking about the various uses of just use marijuana here. And what you are describing is clearly medicinal use. And neither Bobby nor myself have said that medicinal use is wrong for Christians necessarily. Because, again, it's just like you would have to, almost all of the drugs that you're going to get from your doctor regarding pain type stuff is going to be in the category of, this kind of a thing, an opiate or in this case, marijuana. And So personally, I don't think that what you're describing falls into the category that we've been talking about, or the category that the Bible actually, would prohibit us to be involved in. And so, it's funny, like, I know we keep having this drug conversation going on and on. But, it's interesting just the history of, like, cocaine, for example. I mean, you guys know that Coca-Cola used to contain cocaine. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the selling point of it when it, originally began. And cocaine was legal at the time. But then there came a point where cocaine became illegal. And so, you've got all of these different things that have gone on with these various narcotics and different kinds of medications and things. So I think when we're talking about medicinal stuff, and even with medicinal stuff, you have to be careful, right? Because how many people get prescribed opioids by their doctor and end up becoming addicted and end up wrecking, themselves in a major way. So just because a doctor prescribes it doesn't necessarily mean you should take it. But I think from my point of view, what you just described, it sounds like this is purely a medical situation, and this is the treatment that has. I've never had a migraine, but I've had friends who have had migraines that were so severe that they were completely debilitated for a week at a time. I mean, they're just get a migraine and they're out. And so, you just said that ever since you started this protocol with this, you've never had a migraine again. You had the brain damage that you spoke of. So, to me, this is in the category where these things are permissible, and we can look at them as thank God for, thank God for this medication.
Mm-hmm. Bobby.
A couple thoughts. I would say that if you continue using it in a medicinal way, it might be wise, if this is kind of your plan, to have a joint each night. I wonder if there's an edible that could provide the same amount of THC that you could take so that you're not inhaling that smoke into your lungs, because a joint going into your lungs, a good, strong green bud, inhaling that, it can do a number on your lungs over time. So I would say, number one, is there an option to switch from the joint to an edible? But number two, there's always a cause to our issues. And when we jump on an antidepressant, or if we're taking marijuana medicinally, a lot of times that's because we haven't been able to figure out the cause of it. And so we're trying to alleviate the pain. I would say continue to look for the cause. I struggle with migraine headaches myself. It's something that I kicked in maybe about 10 years ago when it started happening. I was able to detect the cause for my migraine headaches, and it's when I'm dehydrated. I've noticed that if I do not drink lots of water, I'm susceptible to a migraine headache. And so I'm very aware. So for me personally, it's not, I need to smoke a joint. It's, I need to drink a lot of water. Now, I'm not saying that's the way for everybody, but I think there's a lot of people out there that get migraine headaches and they don't realize it's because they're drinking so much Coke and they're drinking so much coffee and they're not drinking enough water. They're not staying hydrated. And simple thing like just drinking lots of water can help eradicate the migraines. I've also noticed that once I notice the blurred vision kicking into gear and the migraines beginning to initiate, because I've been dehydrated, I've also noticed that if I take 4 ibuprofen and drink some coffee immediately, then I can get the blurred vision to go away. If I do not get ibuprofen in my system once the blurred vision starts, and if I do not get any caffeine in me, I'm hosed. It can literally lay me out. So those are like solutions to once the blurred vision starts. So keep looking for the cause. Try to notice, like, what causes, like, for example, I used to struggle with fever blisters on my lips. My whole life, I would break out with these fever blisters. Then I started noticing a connection that whenever I ate pineapples or drank too much orange juice, hence acidic stuff, it would cause me to have a breakout in the form of a cold sore on my lip. So many people, they get cold sores and they don't realize that it's treatable because they're not looking for the causes.
Yeah. And in Amina's case, and I know, Bobby, that you said that it's not the case in everybody's situation, but Amina did say that, the brain damage that was caused by her ex-husband several years ago is contributing to the migraines. Yeah, good conversation today on Pastor's Perspective.
All right. Yeah. Wow. We just cracked open a can of worms talking about... Amina's question was perfectly fine, and we're, thank you, Amina, for the question and the call, and I just mean we've been this is kind of set us on a rabbit trail here where we keep going back to this topic, so it's obviously scratching an itch, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we're happy to do that.
Absolutely, and I think we have another one here, Jeremy in California. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Hey, Pastors, thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
So, my question today, well, actually, before I get into that, I gotta say, so I stopped drinking back in December, and I have kind of like the same kind of personality as Bobby, where I can't just have one, so I decided to stop drinking completely. But I gotta say, back when I was drinking heavily, I'd have that one glass of wine that Brian was talking about earlier, and that one glass of wine was enough to give me a head change, and I used to have a pretty high tolerance back then. So, but my question is that, so where I'm at in the point of my walk, I am able to, turn myself aside and say no to my worldly desires. About maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I was at a point where I had that, and I had it in my heart, I had it in my body and my desires, and I was good. But for some reason, I was really struggling this last week where I was still able to physically say no to my desires. But I felt like a really big earning in my heart that desired it, and that earning scared me, because I was thinking of Matthew, it's either Matthew 5 or Matthew 15, about the what comes out of the heart is makes the man unclean. So my question is that even though I'm physically still able to deny myself and deny those worldly desires, and am I still sinning, or is it just as bad as sinning or worse than sinning that I feel that desire in my heart?
So you're asking, because you still are tempted, are you sinning because you're tempted?
I wouldn't even necessarily even consider it temptation. I would kind of consider it like deep down inside me, I kind of want to. I guess that would kind of be considered like temptation, but it's just like deep down inside me. It's like man, I kind of want to do that.
Yeah. Well, that is temptation, and if you had no desire, there would be you wouldn't be tempted, right? I mean, if so the enemy's going to go for your vulnerable areas, and so this is an area, as you said, Jeremy. This is where God brought you out of this stuff. So the devil's going to revisit that as often as he can, and try to get you to succumb to that. And sometimes we're sinners inside, and as we grow in grace and as we continue to be renewed through the Word of God, our desires do change. But that doesn't mean that at any given moment, all of a sudden your desires can just doesn't mean that they won't just suddenly resurface in a really bold way. That's the temptation element there, You might, for example, just by way of illustration, you might, on a regular basis, you might see, as a man, you might see a beautiful woman, and she's just there and she's fine, and hi, how you doing? And it's all good. And, And then just one day out of the blue, she walks by and all of a sudden you're like, wow, all of a sudden you got all these desires that have just suddenly surfaced. What is that? That's temptation. That's the enemy coming and now trying to take this thing to a completely different level. So this is where you resist the devil, draw near to God. He will draw near to you. This is where and the good thing about what you're saying, Jeremy, is like you kind of feel like you'd like to do it. It's good that you recognize that because you're recognizing your own vulnerability and your weakness. And that recognition is going to help you to flee to Jesus, to flee to Christ, and to call on him. The person who says, hey, that could never happen to me. No way, man. I'd never succumb to that. That's the person who's really in a dangerous spot.
Yeah. Bobby, what would you say to Jeremy on this?
Martin Luther's known for saying, you can't help the birds from flying over your head, but you can prevent them from building a nest. As it relates to temptation, temptation's going to come our way, these fiery arrows that we learn about in Ephesians 6. And it's difficult sometimes to recognize, what's from the outside, what's from the inside. What's the temptation from the evil one from without, and how is that playing on the desires from within? I have found that when my desires are really getting in the way is when I begin to entertain those temptations. And then that entertaining turns to desire. And that desire can get really problematic for us. And so when we're starting to desire something so much that we're distracted, that becomes problematic. So take, for example, like I know in my own life, like I try to be very vulnerable and share, and I'm thankful for an audience that is receptive to that. And it's because I think that transparency is my survival medicine. And I think it helps me to recognize that I'm not above sin. By God's grace, I have been a faithful husband. I've been married 24 years and I've not looked at pornography in my marriage. I can say that. But I can say this. When I took the wedding vows, I wish that all women became unattractive from that point forward. Unfortunately, I still recognize beautiful women. And I can know sometimes I've been preparing for a sermon in a coffee shop and a beautiful woman comes in and then there comes that temptation, right? Well, what happens is when I'm no longer able to focus on my sermon prep because I'm getting distracted, and taking multiple looks, I'm in the problem zone, right? Because temptation can build desire. And we all have to be aware of that. And one of the things I've noticed in my life as it relates maybe to lust, every time I look, I get a little bit weaker. Every time I look away, I get a little bit stronger. And so I know that we all have to be aware, as Brian said, of our shadows. My good friend David Wood, who has a great YouTube channel at Acts 17 Apologetics, he came on and he just did an episode about Ravi Zacharias and his failure. And one of the things that David was convinced of, number one, Ravi traveled alone a lot, and I think that can be dangerous for people in the ministry. But number two, he went at such a pace that he was hardly home. So his willpower was getting worn down. And number three, there wasn't a lot of transparency about, we didn't really know what Ravi's weaknesses were, right? Well, David then proceeds to share all of his weaknesses. He says, I just want to be transparent. Let me tell you what, I struggle with this, and I struggle with this, and I struggle with this, and I struggle with this. And he says, so you're not surprised. These are my weaknesses right here. Let me just tell you. And I thought, wow, that was so refreshing to hear this, famous YouTuber just air it out and say, I struggle in these ways. And I think that that's what we need to do. We can't put off this image that makes it look like we have it all together. So I applaud Brian's discernment and insight into what you brought up. You're just acknowledging your weakness, and I think that will protect you, honestly.
Another thing that Jeremy brought up was that it seems like this temptation is getting stronger. Could it be, we've heard the analogy of letting the dog starve. I would think as the dog gets even hungrier and hungrier, it's going to try to eat more.
Well, I think we have to realize too, because when we're talking about temptation, we're talking about a tempter. So there is another person involved in this, and that's, the demonic forces that we will talk about when we come back.
All right, that'll be in just a little bit. Hang on.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues. And now, here's today's host, Brian Perez.
Hello, thanks so much for joining us. If you're listening on this Monday afternoon or Monday evening, the program is not live. We recorded the program on Thursday, and on Thursday, starting at 3 p.m. all the way on, we've just been having these great conversations with you guys, and we appreciate it that you guys have been calling us, and we'll be live again tomorrow to take more of your calls, but right now we've got lots of calls on the board, and before we get to any more, though, we were speaking with Jeremy, and then the music started. Pastor Brian, you wanted to bring up about the tempter.
Yeah, right. So, we're talking about temptation, and we have to remember that there's a tempter. So, the devil is real, and the devil is looking for opportune moments. And so what I was getting at with this is, and it kind of was what you were saying, Brian, the Bible speaks about putting on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand in the evil day. So the evil day is a reference to a time of just sort of concentrated and intense attack upon us. So, it's not every day that you walk around under this severe kind of oppression or severe sort of a temptation, but there are times when you do. And so you have to recognize that, and I think, as we're talking to Jeremy, I think that what he's describing is actually this is an evil day in that sense, that the enemy knows his weakness and is pressing in on him. So that's why I said earlier, this is why you really have to retreat into Jesus at these times and recognize, like, okay, wow, those desires are still there. Recognizing, like Bobby was saying a minute ago with David Wood, just, look, I could fall to sin at any time. I am not in any way guaranteed that if I just said, well, that could never take me down. No, that probably would be the thing that would take me down. So I just have to recognize that I have vulnerabilities, and my only security and safety and protection is Jesus, and submitting to Him and just saying, Lord, I'm going to do what your word says, not what my longing or my deep desire feels at this moment.
Yeah.
So let's go back to Jeremy for a second and see if any of this has helped him. Jeremy, what do you think? Anything we said help you?
No, yeah, that actually that helped me a lot. I do just for clarity though, and for my sake. So then I shouldn't be worried then, as long as I'm denying the desire and the temptation, I shouldn't be worried, and I should be able to stand before Jesus in my time of judgment and have a clear conscience then, right?
Yeah, because there, like we said, you can't. Temptation is something that you don't have any power over in one sense. I mean, obviously, you could put yourself in a place to be tempted, but we're not talking about that. You're not opening yourself up willingly to this. But there's another type of temptation that we don't have any control over. This is just where the enemy comes along and just says, okay, I'm gonna present something, to this person. And so that's not a sin. The only time sin comes into the picture is when we succumb to it. And like Bobby said earlier, we have to be careful because we can start to succumb to it on a small incremental level, and then suddenly we find ourselves, falling headlong into it. So you want to just, you don't want to toy with it at all. You don't want to give it any space. You want to just say, okay, well, no, this is, this thought, this desire, this isn't, I know this is wrong. It's not right. It's just the way it is. So I'm going to, again, yield myself to Jesus. But don't be condemned over the fact that you're being tempted. in the kind of thing you're describing, this isn't something that you are able to control, with the exception of you're able to control not surrendering to it.
Bobby, would you add anything to that?
I would just say it's important for all of us, again, to be aware of our shadow. Where are we vulnerable? Read Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. If you haven't, that could be a helpful book. Then write your own screw tape letter to yourself. That was an exercise I did in seminary where I had to write out and read to my small group of fellow seminarians my own screw tape letter. If I was the evil one, how would I go about undoing me? And being aware of those shadows. And then I would say, once you're aware of that, put some boundaries in place to protect yourself. I created a course called Crushing Lust, Craving God that I've taught many times to the men where I've pastored in the past. And I share with them kind of like, my 10 commandments to sexual purity that I put back together at Dallas Seminary coming out of the Screw Tape Letters, where it was like, okay, what are some good boundaries then that I could put in place? Now, the interesting about these boundaries, they can change over time. So, for example, for many years, I don't even know, probably for 15 years, I never turned on a television set when I was alone. In the house, I could come in and Blue's Clues could be on and I'd turn the TV off. I wouldn't watch the TV on the road. I never turned it on. Then you started getting into the internet generation, and I was working on the internet all the time doing sermons. By God's grace, I looked at, pornography when I was younger, but it was in the form of VHS videos. So I was fortunate that it, like these young generations that just associate pornography and the internet, I didn't have that connection, thankfully, though it's right there at my fingertips. Well, what I started to realize is, I'm on the computer all the time, and by God's grace, I'm not going on and checking out these other sites when I'm on the road. So now I'm comfortable turning on a television set if I'm on the road, but I still want to make sure that I have proper boundaries about what I'm watching. So, you don't go into a hotel room and go, what are the adult features that they got running here? You have to be careful that you don't start playing these mind games. So all that to say, one set of boundaries can serve you at one stage of your life, but it doesn't mean that they need to be the same set of boundaries 5, 10, 15 years down the road, because we grow. So we take a look at those boundaries, and then maybe we're able to loosen up in one area, but not in another. So like one area, like I still don't go out to eat with the opposite sex alone. I don't spend time, with women alone. That's just kind of a hard boundary that's been in my life. Why is that? I just think you can open up doors. But that doesn't mean I would look at another person that doesn't have that same boundary and think that person's having an affair. I think that would be dangerous. So we all have to understand we're different and recognize that and respect it.
Indeed. Jeremy, thanks for your phone call today.
You know what I was thinking? In The Powers of Darkness and the People of God, I have a whole chapter on temptation, and maybe it'd be good to send that book to Jeremy.
Sure, that's a good idea. Jeremy, stay on the line. We're going to send you a copy of Pastor Brian's book. It's called The Powers of Darkness and the People of God. Everybody else, you can order it at backtobasicsradio.com. Click the resources tab, and you can order it. Again, it's called The Powers of Darkness and the People of God. This is Pastor's Perspective. I'm Brian Perez, here with Pastor Brian Brodersen of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. Bobby, you have since caught up on all the episodes of Blue's Clues. You've watched them all now. It's okay for you to watch them now? Are you binge watching?
Yes, no. I have not done any binge watching, and I just felt that I do want to clarify one point. As a pastor, there would have been a time where, like, I even have boundaries, like how much I would counsel the opposite sex. But if I did that, that would be an open door policy. So we all have these different things, but I'll tell my wife about that. And so I wouldn't repeatedly counsel the opposite sex. But my wife would even say, well, you're people's pastor, honey. You need to be approachable. Somebody wants to meet with you once, and I don't have a problem with that. But those open dialogues where we protect ourselves from getting sneaky and doing those things, it can become really dangerous in our lives. So all that to say, I recognize how valuable boundaries have been. But early on, I felt like everybody needed to adopt my boundaries. And that becomes dangerous as Christians when we start doing that.
Yeah, and as a pastor, you do that too, right? You just start preaching to your church everything that God's dealing with you about, and then
right.
Pretty soon everybody's all bound up in all kinds of legalism. I used to struggle over the years because surfing was such an idol in my life. I would always go through these seasons where I would just like, oh, I think God's convicting me about surfing. I shouldn't surf. And I had a church full of surfers. I get up and tell everybody about, how the Lord's convicting me. And everybody's like, oh, gosh, man, I got to get rid of my board. For 2 or 3 months, we'd all be out of the water,
Did you have a board burning ceremony?
Yeah, we sold them.
Yeah.
Different things. Joey Baran and I used to do, we would both do it together. We would like, I think the Lord's convicting us about surfing.
Man.
And then we'd, get rid of our boards. And then 3 months later, I think the Lord's saying it's okay now. So.
The boundaries changed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were just, immature and needing to grow. And we did. So.
Well, that's good to hear.
And so now I can surf 365 days a year, and I can't even find it in me to make myself go in the water. I just am. It's terrible. It's a terrible state.
Now that you're free to do it,
now that I'm free to do it again, I just have no desire to do it. What happened to all that passion to surf?
Yeah. All right, let's go back to the phones, and here's our friend Haley. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Haley.
Hey, you guys.
Hey.
It's an awesome pleasure to be here
Haley.
again. I just want to say, something that I've really been learning is that not only is, God's word alive through the Bible, you read it and it reads you, but it's alive through the people, you guys are seriously becoming a part of my sanctification and my growing in my discernment, and you keep dropping these pearls of wisdom, and I'm just collecting them like a scavenger. I'm just collecting them and figuring out what to do with them. So thank you guys for just being so accessible and wanting to help. It's almost like you guys have taken me under your wing as far as just showing me how to approach the Bible. So thank you guys. I just love you guys so much. You're incredible. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Haley. That's very kind of you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm such a goofball, but my question today is, so I'm still in Samuel, and now I'm in 2 Samuel. And my question yesterday was about that too, but today there's that part, I think it's 2 Samuel 6, and they have the Ark of the Covenant, I think is what it's called, and Uzzah.
Yep.
Is that how you say his name? Uzzah.
Yep.
God strikes him down because the oxen stumbled or something. And I think what he did, if I'm understanding it right, is he basically went to catch it from falling, and God took it so seriously that he killed him. Is the reason why he did that basically, is that to show that it's really important that you trust God, and that he didn't have to do that, and he touched a holy thing he wasn't supposed to? What exactly? Because then David got mad. He got afraid of God. He was oh, I don't want to accept the covenant anymore, the Ark of the Covenant. So could you guys just kind of explain what's happening? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, sure. And I was just reading this myself in my own personal reading. Yesterday, I think it was. So, there's a couple of things that we need to think about here. Number one, we need to remember that the Ark of the Covenant is the presence of God. So, the Ark was the visible place where God's presence dwelt. That's why, say, when the children of Israel were crossing over the Jordan into the Promised Land, remember the Ark went before them, and the Jordan parted, like the Red Sea parted. That it was parting at the presence of the Lord. So that's number one. Second thing is because this was a holy object, because it was God's presence, there were very specific instructions on how it was to be transported. And at this stage, David completely disregarded those very specific instructions. So it was, it's all spelled out in the law. That the priest were to put these poles through it, and a number of priests were to carry it. And so David has it on this cart, so he's transporting it this way. And another thing that we see that's kind of a consistent thing that happens as God is renewing his work with his people, oftentimes he reminds them in a stark and sometimes in a kind of a frightening way of his own holiness. So you think back to the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. The giving of the law was a frightening thing. Moses was terrified. The people were terrified. So with David, God is kind of, after all of these centuries now of all of this idolatry and everything that the people have been involved in during the book of Judges and all of this, God's sort of renewing the covenant with David. And so in doing that, in this incident, God is reminding them again of the fact that he is holy. And you just can't do things the way you want to do them. You've got to do things the way God wants them done. Now, Uzzah, we don't know anything else about him. We don't know if, it sounds like he had a good motive. Oh no, the ox has stumbled. The ark is going to tip over. I better grab it and prevent it from happening. That's what it sounds like. We don't know what was in Uzzah's heart. There could have been some sinful stuff in his heart, but this is a bit of an illustration of what the scripture says about God, that no man can see me and live. No one can live, in my presence. So if the ark is God's presence and Uzzah touches it, this is a death sentence because Uzzah is by nature unholy. God is holy. And so, but the outcome, remember, as you said, the outcome is David is frightened. All of a sudden, David realizes, oh my, this is way more serious than maybe David was even realizing. And then the ark goes into the house of this man, Obed-Edom, and 3 months later, word comes to David, Obed-Edom is being blessed, and so then David takes and he moves the ark into the tabernacle that he had erected for it. So I don't know if that helped you, Haley, but that's the story.
Yeah, Bobby, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, thank you, Haley, for calling. I'm so thankful that my daughter Haley's getting married to a godly man, and my single son, I listen to you and I think, Lord, bless my son with a godly woman like Haley someday, because he's such a godly young man, and I love your spiritual hunger, and I love that my daughter has got a fiance that's just so spiritually hungry, and that encourages us when a young lady or a young man calls with such fervor, and we see that passion, and we get to be a part of your growth. David, it's an interesting situation. I mean, he saw a side of God that I would say the justice of God was so manifest in David's life, yet he was still a man after God's own heart. And I love that because David, for example, he gets angry, right? He doesn't like this. He doesn't understand it. And isn't that what we do? Like when God's justice is meted out, we can wrestle with that. What I love about David is I can identify. I think if I was in that situation, I'd be like, wow, God, chill. I mean, this is incredible. Why did this happen like this? On another occasion, David saw God's justice. He sleeps with Bathsheba, and then as a result, he loses his child, right? This is horrific. He also saw the consequences of what his son would do and kind of, on the rooftop in this vile sin of sleeping in the open with females. And then you think about the census that David called for. And then he gets these three options, none of which were good. He just chose to throw himself at the mercy of the Lord, and he chose pestilence. Well, 70,000 people die in one day. And I'm thinking, David really saw the justice of God meted out. And I love the fact that he's still called a man after God's own heart. We live in a day with progressive Christians. What they want to do is they want to erase the justice of God to the exclusion of God's agape love, and instead of wrestle with it. And I think what David is he's a model for all of us. He's a model for all of us who sin, that we can still be forgiven and have a relationship with God and love God. He's a model for all of us who don't understand the ways of God, that God is still worth pursuing. And he's a model for all of us who wrestle with the seemingly injustices of God, yet come to believe that God is still just and he's still worthy of our worship when we can't understand his often confusing ways.
All right, Haley, thank you for calling us from Idaho today on the Pastor's Perspective program. Brian Perez here with Brian Brodersen and Bobby Conway. We're going to go to Michael in California with a question about Satan being an angel of light. Hi there, Michael. What's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
All is well. All is well. It's good to be on.
Good to have you listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, hey, this is what I got. So, I live in a Christian men's group home.
Okay.
And unfortunately, one of our brothers went to be home with the Lord last month. And so the following morning, one of our other brothers was on his way to work, and he said that when he was leaving, he saw our deceased brother looking out the window. And I told another brother, and then he said that, oh, that's a demon. Because I got to go back to scripture, to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 14 and 15. So my question to you is, was that one of Satan's servants masquerading as an angel of light? Or could it really have been, our deceased loved one saying his goodbyes?
Okay. Brian, what do you tell Michael?
Well, was there any more to it than he just saw him at the window? Did he say anything? Was there any communication, or was it just, I saw him at the window?
Yeah, he said that he saw him sitting in his wheelchair, in the windowsill. I guess just looking at each other.
Well, it could have been his imagination. Maybe he just, imagined that he saw him sitting there. I think that would be the most likely situation. An angel of light, in the context where Paul is talking about false teachers, and he says that, we shouldn't be surprised that there are false apostles, because even Satan masquerades as an angel of light. So his ministers, he goes on to refer to these people, these false teachers, as his ministers. So of course they're going to be pretending to be the ministers of Christ. So all of that to say, the context has nothing to do with anything like you've just described, just a person, appearing and seeming to sit there. An angel of light would be a deceptive spirit that's trying to lead somebody away from the gospel. And so that wasn't happening. So I would say no. And I would say that it probably really was just, some sort of an imaginary type of a thing that happened, rather than an apparition, rather than an actual appearance of the person.
All right, Michael, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go to Christian in California. Hello. Question about Isaiah 66.
Yes. Hi. How you guys doing?
Doing well, thanks.
Yes.
So verses 14 through 17, you want to know if these verses are prophetic. I'll read them really quick. When you see this, your heart will rejoice. You will flourish like grass. The hand of the Lord will be made known to his servants, but his fury will be shown to his foes. See, the Lord is coming with fire, and his chariots are like a whirlwind. He will bring down his anger with fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. For with fire and with sword, the Lord will execute judgment upon all men, and many will be those slain by the Lord. So you want to know if this verse has already happened or if it's yet to be fulfilled.
And the next verse too.
Oh, the next verse too. Sorry. Oh, you're right. Verse 17. Those who consecrate and purify themselves to go into the gardens, following the one in the midst of those who eat the flesh of pigs and rats and other abominable things, they will meet their end together. Okay, so has that already happened, you guys? Or is it going to happen?
Well, the 66th chapter of Isaiah is, it's definitely referring to the distant future that hasn't occurred, but some aspects of it are probably also referring to the Babylonian invasion that will come about 100 years from Isaiah's time. So sometimes you have these two things blended together. You have, like in chapter 13, for example, 13, you have the destruction of Babylon predicted in Isaiah, but it's clearly the destruction of the future Babylon, the final world power that rises up against Christ in the end. So, but it's kind of a blending of the two things. And a lot of times with prophecy, you get a near fulfillment and you get a distant fulfillment. And so that's what's happening here in 66.
Okay. Bobby, what would you add to that?
I would just add, reading verse 18 could kind of help too. It says, "For I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and shall see my glory."
And that's the future.
Future prophecy. All right. Very good. So, Christian, thanks for your phone call today. That's all the time we have on today's program. We'll be live tomorrow, so give us a call then. If we didn't get to your call today, we'd love to hear from you at 888-564-6173. Great conversation on today's program. So keep it coming tomorrow. 888-564-6173, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Phone lines open about 7 minutes before that. For Pastor Brian Brodersen and Dr. Bobby Conway, I'm Brian Perez. Thanks for listening. God bless you guys. Good night.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/pastorsperspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.